Congress certifies Joe Biden's victory in the Electoral College. We'll have highlights from a chaotic day in the nation's capital, plus the latest on election protest at 4 state capitol buildings. And some Southeast Kansas Sheriff's Department employees begin receiving COVID-19 vaccines after a delay.
The 4 states' most watched news starts now.
Good morning and welcome to the KOAM Morning News. It's 5 a.m. I'm Tanya Bach. Coming up this half hour, the opening night of the Kaminsky Classic Basketball Tournament was last night. We'll have highlights. And protesters stormed the Capitol Hill yesterday during congressional electoral count. For our Something to Talk About, we're asking what your reaction to the protest was. You can participate in our Insta poll at KOAMnewsnow.com/vote. But first, a check on your forecast.
All right, thank you, Tanya. Good morning, everybody. Nick here in for Slip today. We are keeping an eye on a storm system that's leading up to a west start this morning. It looks quiet at first glimpse from Freeman Health System on the south side of Joplin, but we still have technically a winter weather advisory clipping Berry, Lawrence, and Benton counties east of 49 until about 3 o'clock this afternoon. But even if you aren't under the winter weather advisory, we have a good mix of rain and snow because even though we might be hovering just above the freezing mark, it's cold enough upstairs that as this moisture comes down, some of you are seeing rain, others of you seeing some snow leading to accumulations on the grassy surfaces, minor, but even some slushy wet roads. So something to keep an eye on if you're going to be hitting the road pretty soon here this morning. And you'll definitely want to bundle up too because we're all between 33 and 35 degrees. For the kiddos making their way to school, again, it's going to be cold with the rain snow mix around, most of us in the lower to middle 30s, but we will improve, but only somewhat today. We're going to get rid of this rain snow mix once we get past the start of the afternoon, but we'll hold on to the clouds and see highs near 38. So Tanya's going to be kind of a tricky go for the roads this morning, but as I was coming in, the roads were pretty much manageable and okay. We'll dive deeper into the forecast coming up here in a bit.
All right, we'll definitely take a look at that. Thanks, Nick. Well, nearly 12 hours after gaveling into session, Congress has finished its count of electoral votes. Earlier in the day, mobs of the president's supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol building to protest the election's results. Natalie Brand is on Capitol Hill with more.
The votes for President of the United States are as follows. Joseph R. Biden, Jr. of the state of Delaware has received 306 votes. Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida has received 232 votes.
In the early hours of Thursday morning, the joint session of Congress affirmed President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris's Electoral College win after defeating objections to Arizona and Pennsylvania's votes.
Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are lawfully elected and will become the President and the Vice President of the United States on January the 20th.
It's past time to accept reality, to reaffirm our democracy, and move on.
Earlier, rioters stormed the building, breaking through doors and busting windows. Capitol Police drew their weapons at one barricaded door from inside the House.
You have to go home now.
President Trump posted a video that has since been removed from Facebook and Twitter, urging calm. Hours earlier, he addressed a gathering near the White House.
We will never give up. We will never concede.
President-elect Joe Biden also addressed the chaos here, calling it an assault on democracy and an insurrection.
Today's reminder, a painful one, that democracy is fragile, and to preserve it requires people of goodwill, leaders with the courage to stand up.
In response to the day's chaos, several Democratic lawmakers are now calling for President Trump to be removed from office. Natalie Brand, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
The mayor of D.C. said in a news conference last night more than 50 arrests were made yesterday. She also said 2 pipe bombs were recovered along with Molotov cocktails. She's extended a public emergency order for D.C. for the next 15 days through the inauguration. Missouri Senator Roy Blunt tweeted that the violence at the Capitol yesterday is shameful and voiced his appreciation to Capitol Police. Senator Jim Imhoff from Oklahoma echoed the senator from Missouri, thanking law enforcement and calling for an end to the violence. Missouri Senator Josh Hawley's press office issued a tweet that also called for an end to the violence and praised law enforcement. Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma had previously planned to object to the Electoral College certification, but voted to certify, saying, quote, "We must stand together as Americans. We must defend our Constitution and the rule of law." In a statement sent to KOAM News, U.S. Congressman Jake LaTurner from Kansas said, quote, "The lawless behavior at the U.S. Capitol is reprehensible and has no place in our country. This is a stain on American history, and I condemn it in the strongest possible terms." Close to 1,000 supporters of President Trump gathered yesterday outside the Oklahoma Capitol. Protesters held Trump 2020 flags and signs that read, "Stop the Steal." A handful carried long guns, which is legal in Oklahoma. The Oklahoma legislature was not in session, and much of the crowd dispersed after a light rain began to fall. About 200 people rallied at the Kansas State House yesterday to show their support for overturning President-elect Joe Biden's victory. They chanted, "Stop the Steal," 4 more years, and no more masks. The rally even brought up some prominent Republican leaders.
The Constitution and federal statutes set out today as a potential decision point, and that's why it's so important. You know, in previous elections, people just, this day came and went, and people said, "Oh, I read that they did something in Congress." Well, today at least people are learning.
The rally was met with counter-demonstrators who hope to send a message of their own. Hundreds of protesters gathered for a Stop the Steal rally at the Missouri Capitol in Jefferson City yesterday. Some said they feel disenfranchised. CBS affiliate there, KRCG, says some protesters drove more than 2 hours to be at that rally. Well, more Southeast Kansas counties are getting coronavirus vaccines. Last week, we reported 100 doses of Moderna vaccine were in Crawford County when they were designated for Labette and Cherokee County. Both counties have received vaccines, and staff at the Labette County Sheriff's Office has started being vaccinated. Many of them are jail staff, something the sheriff prioritized since they've been dealing with a COVID outbreak that's resulted in 41 positive cases. Cherokee County is also getting ready to vaccinate staff, with a lot of emergency medical personnel already getting first doses. Sheriff Groves hopes it means a light at the end of the tunnel.
Where we can see our way through, this pandemic to where it's not at least as spread as easily and to as many people. So, that certainly had an impact on a lot of families, a lot of businesses, and the sooner we can get to that next phase of mitigating some of that hardship, the better.
The state of Kansas is still in the first phase of its distribution plan. Officials expect vaccine to be available to the general public in the spring, with availability becoming widespread in the summer. Missouri Governor Mike Parson's office says as of yesterday, about 98,000 Phase 1A people in the state received their first vaccine dose, but more than 352,000 Phase 1A people are still waiting for their first dose. Plans for a more broad distribution of the vaccine will be released next week, but no date has been announced for Phase 1B of the vaccine distribution. Joplin School District, or the Joplin School Board, voted yesterday to extend a policy offering paid sick leave for workers who test positive for COVID-19. A federal policy giving workers 10 days of sick leave expired on December 31st. The school board is extending it until June 30th. It's 5:07.
We are starting off with a rain-snow mix this morning. It's going to continue at a steady pace up until about lunchtime. Then we're going to see it taper off while we go into the afternoon. We're going to hold on to the clouds though today. Highs are 38. Dry for the rest of the weekend, at least to start. Then we'll see if a quick system on Sunday could bring in a few flurries. Overall, though, it's going to stay pretty cold for the next few days.
That's a look at this morning's top stories and weather in our first 7 minutes. Coming up on the KOAM Morning News, Missouri Southern and Pittsburgh State women's basketball teams face off Saturday for an MIAA standing. We'll have a preview. Plus, we get reaction from protesters to yesterday's unrest in D.C. And 5 ways to help prevent sledding injuries. You're watching the KOAM Morning News. More real news in the morning. We'll be right back.
Last night was the opening night of the Comiskey Classic at Joplin High. 2 pool play games last night, beginning with the Webb City Cardinals facing the Blue Jays of Clever. Webb City, they are ranked 5-1 and ranked 8th in the state in Class 5 coming off of the holiday break. In the first quarter, Mickey Gerard, he had 22 points and the Cars up 8 going into the second quarter. Something did some real damage in that second quarter with Caden Turner hitting the 3 ball right there. Then it's going to be Cole Vaden knocking one down. Nicely done there. And finally, Nikai Howard, a good look to Alex Martin. Web City outscores Clever 24-8 in the second. And then Howard with the easy pull-up here, 16 with 6 assists last night for Howard. And in the fourth, Trenton Hayes, good from the top of the key. It was all Web City last night with their win of 75-42. We had the tournament host Joplin on the floor against Carl Junction. We had Dante Washington looking at a nice night for him. He knocks down the three right there. Two teams trade baskets early with Alex Baker scoring on the far end for CJ right there. Dogs down one after one. In the second quarter, All Right gets going. Still love that name. A tough drive here to score, but this one, that is definitely easier. 7 for Wright in the second, 15 on the night. And it goes back to Washington. He had a team high 16, but the Eagles got by CJ last night with a final of 63-52. And it is rivalry week. Try saying that once, for Pittsburgh State and Missouri Southern. These two teams will meet on Saturday at the John Lance Arena in Pittsburgh. And on the women's side, it's a battle of two teams that are playing pretty well right now. Both the Lions and Gorillas have won 4 games in a row heading into this weekend's game. So this one is big, not just because it's a rivalry, but because these two teams are battling for position in the MIAA standings.
Through the years, rivalries get built for different reasons. This one, majority of it is because of the location. But I think, at the same time, it's two teams that are going to be battling. I know they're on a 4-game winning streak, so are we. And so it's both teams trying to battle just in the kind of identical situation where neither team wants to lose. And so I think that adds a little bit to the fire.
It's such a great rivalry. To me, it's a fun rivalry in that aspect. And our returning kids understand it. Their returning kids understand the importance of it. Our new kids sometimes don't understand until they've been in it and played in it. Then they get a good feeling of it.
And that does it for sports this morning. Still to come in the KOAM Morning News, we'll have international reaction to yesterday's unrest on Capitol Hill. But first, I'll have a look at today's forecast and the 7-day forecast when the KOAM Morning News returns. Start weather off this morning. We are starting off with the big picture overlooking the lower 48, but more importantly, what's working over us to start this morning out. We've got quite an upper level low, still not that terribly strong, but it definitely has a lot of moisture with it. That is why, with temperatures cold, certainly upstairs, and just about the freezing mark here, we are seeing some spots where it's rain, but in other spots, that rain is actually mixing in with a little bit of snow that's actually accumulating a bit, anywhere from a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch from what I've seen on the drive in from work this morning. But again, it's mainly on the grassy surfaces, but that is leading to some wet roads and maybe a couple slushy spots too. So not too treacherous for the roads this morning, but this is something to keep in mind as we get going this morning. Overlooking Freeman Health System, it's cloudy with some rain and a little bit of snow around Joplin with a temperature of 34. Feels like 29 with that north breeze at 6. Certainly cold. No surprise there, 33 and up to 36. Everybody else right in between those two numbers. So in general, we are starting out with our rain-snow mix and a lot of cloud cover throughout the course of the morning. Then once we get past the start of the afternoon, we're going to dry things out, but we have to hold on to the cloud cover today. That means instead of highs back in the mid-40s, we'll go 34 by 8, 36 by noon, only seeing highs topping out around 38 degrees. So again, we got to keep with the rain and snow chances, the mix of the two, throughout the course of the morning. But as we head toward lunchtime and into the afternoon, you could twist my arm and say there might be a few straggling showers, maybe a couple snow showers out there, but we're going to gradually taper off this activity throughout the course of the day. But again, most of us trying to push into the upper 30s for this afternoon. But even though we're dry for tonight, the cloud cover in place, it's going to be cold with lows in the upper 20s. And if we're not careful, if any roads are still wet with temperatures dropping back below freezing tonight, that could lead to maybe a few slick spots on the roads for your Friday morning. So something to keep an eye on, but at least on the positive note, we're going to be dry to start the weekend out. Dry Friday and Saturday with highs near 39 or 40. Then we'll see if a quick system on Sunday can bring in a few flurries. Otherwise, we'll stay cloudy and we'll stay cold. Meantime, the events in D.C. yesterday have sparked controversy nationwide and even among some of the protesters themselves. Our CBS affiliate in Washington spoke to some of those in the crowd.
Clouds of smoke and clashes with police. Outside the United States Capitol, pro-Trump rioters attempted a second time to seize the seat of government, scaling the building and breaking through doors.
There's not enough cops here to handle us, and that's troubling.
Trouble that Isaiah Kuzinga says spiraled out of control and forced him to take a step back from fellow Trump supporters.
Trying to egg everybody on. And those are the people that we do not need with us, because they make me look bad. Because with them going up, they're just destroying everything that we're trying to do. We're trying to show everybody that we're compassionate about America right now. Because actually, everyone that's leaving right now, they're not supporting this. Because this is like the opposite of what we wanted.
What Felice Pete says she wanted was fair votes, coming from North Carolina to advocate for that.
We feel that the election needed to be audit and fair and true, and all legal votes count. I mean, if we lost, then we lost, but we can't lose with irregularities.
Her concerns leading her to bring her 9-year-old son with her to the nation's capital, so he too could see the opposition to the election firsthand.
He was witnessing history today, that the people stood up. And at every turning of America, people had to stand up.
To do what? Huizinga says he's not even sure.
They want to tear this whole type building down, but if you tear it down, what's the next step? That's like the main thing that I want to ask people. Like, they don't know what the next step is.
And that leads us to our something to talk about this morning. We want to hear from you about what your reaction was to the election protests in Washington, D.C. the other day. We have it pinned to the top of our Facebook page. Just search for KOAM News Now on the Facebook page, or you can also participate in our Insta poll. Just KOAMNews.com/vote, or you can vote using the KOAM News app for Apple or Android. We'll be back after the break.
Topping Health Watch this morning. It's a popular and fun activity in the winter, but sledding can also lead people to the emergency room. Many times it's children who are hurt. Mandy Gaither has 5 ways to help prevent those injuries.
When the snow falls down, the sleds come out and ER visits go up.
We just want to make sure that they are aware of the risks and to make sledding as safe as possible.
That's why Rebecca McAdams with Nationwide Children's Hospital co-authored a study published in the Clinical Journal of Sports Medicine. Collecting data from the National Electronic Injury Surveillance System, the researchers estimated more than 220,400 patients went to the emergency room after being hurt while sledding between 2008 and 2017. Nearly 70% were 19 or younger, most hurt in a collision.
They were falling off the sled and hitting the ground, or they were also hitting into a person.
McAdams says many of those were head injuries, but you can lessen your risk of getting hurt by wearing a helmet, picking a sled that you can control, one that can be steered or stopped, checking your surroundings, making sure the area is obstacle-free, having an adult present to make sure everyone is staying safe, and don't use a motorized vehicle to pull a sled.
Most times people were actually colliding into the ATV itself, and a lot of those people had head injuries, and 3/4 of those people were actually children.
So have fun in the snow, but stay safe. For Health Minute, I'm Mandy Gaither.
Now, researchers say the number of sledding injuries in the ER have decreased over the time period they studied, but they say that may mean that people are possibly seeking care somewhere else, like in urgent care or calling their doctor directly. Well, a new review shows COVID-19 is generally mild in young children. Australian researchers looked at dozens of studies and found children under 5 years old were likely to recover. Half of those infected were infants. Almost half of the younger children who were positive for COVID-19 had no symptoms. New research highlights the importance for heart failure patients to take precautions to prevent COVID-19. European researchers found patients with acute heart failure have nearly double the risk of dying if they get the coronavirus. And mindfulness can help breast cancer survivors with pain. That's according to a University of Ottawa study that looked at breast cancer survivors with neuropathic pain who practice mindfulness. Researchers found reductions in brain activity in areas related to pain, emotional regulation, and cognitive processing. That's a look at some of today's top health stories. You're watching the KOAM Morning News.
And before we hit another commercial break, we're coming up on 5:27. A quick look at the forecast before we hit the commercial break. We're not going to do a lot of warming up today, not just because of the periods of rain and snow throughout the morning, but the cloud cover is going to hold on for the rest of the day. 34 by 8 a.m., only seeing highs topping out around 38 degrees this afternoon. We are seeing a good bands of rain and snow rotating across the area, and the future track takes us to 10 o'clock where we start to see the activity try to lighten up a little bit, where it's still a mix of rain and snow. But even as we get past the start of the afternoon, you could twist my arm and say maybe a straggling rain or snow shower as we head into the afternoon. But in general, once we get past lunchtime, we're going to see this activity taper off and the overall trend will be drying out as we head throughout the course of the day. Doesn't change the fact that we're cold to start the weekend now. 39 on Friday, 40 on Saturday. Both of those days are dry. After we see maybe a flurry or two on Sunday, we're going to finally see highs back in the 40s and 50s by the middle of next week. We'll be right back. This is
Congress certifies Joe Biden's victory in the Electoral College. Will have highlights from a chaotic day in the nation's capital, plus the latest on election protest at 4 state capitol buildings, and some Southeast Kansas Sheriff's Department employees begin receiving COVID-19 vaccines after a delay.
The 4 states' most watched news starts now.
Good morning and welcome to the KOAM Morning News. It's 5:30. I'm Tanya Bach. Coming up this half hour, what is your reaction to the election protest in Washington, D.C.? We let you weigh in on our Something to Talk About, and how one paramedic discovered a face shield and gave back to his colleagues. But first, a check on your forecast.
Thanks, Tanya. And good morning, everybody. Nick here with Slip having the day off. We are looking at the first glimpse of a Freeman Health System on the south side of Joplin. Looks quiet, but we're definitely cloudy up top and the rain snow mix out there to start the morning out. Where we see more expected accumulations in terms of snow, that's for Barry, Lawrence, and Benton counties. That's where we still have a winter weather advisory until 3 o'clock this afternoon. But even for the rest of us, even though a lot of the area isn't under winter weather advisory, we still have a good batch of rain and mixing in with some snow sitting right on top of the region. I will say on the grassy surfaces on the drive in from Joplin, we have seen, or I've seen rather, grassy accumulations pushing about ½ an inch, if not a little bit more. And it just led to wet roads and maybe some slushy roads in a few spots. So something to keep in mind as we continue with our rain and snow chances to start the morning out. It's definitely cold out there, 32 in Mount Vernon, 35 in Chitopa. Everybody else right in between the two, so it's definitely cold. Whether you're one of the kiddos heading to the bus stop on your way to school this morning, we're going to keep those rain and snow chances around. For the rest of us, we are looking at just a cold day in general. Well, once we get past lunchtime, we're going to taper off on these rain and snow chances, but again, the cloudy skies holding place in that northeast breeze of 5 to 10 means we'll only top out at 38 this afternoon. We do have dry time on the way, Tanya, and eventually warmer temperatures on the way. We'll break that down on the 7-day coming up in a bit.
All right, sounds like we got a lot to talk about. It definitely, it's chilly outside, that's for sure.
No doubt about it.
Yeah, I want to go back to Tuesday when it was nice and warm.
That sounds really good right now.
That would be nice. All right, thanks, Nick. Congress officially confirms President-elect Joe Biden as the next president of the United States in the early morning hours. Congress voted down objections raised by President Trump's GOP allies over the Arizona and Pennsylvania votes. Earlier in the day, some rioters entered the House chamber. 4 people died, including one woman who was shot. The mob marched on the Capitol after being incited by the president at a morning rally. By evening, shaken lawmakers reconvened to continue the presidential electoral vote count. Well, hours after voting on the House floor, Kansas Congressman Jake LaTurner announced on Twitter he tested positive for COVID-19. LaTurner took a COVID-19 test because of Washington, D.C.'s guidelines that calls for visitors to be checked. According to his tweet, LaTurner does not have any symptoms. He says he's following guidelines from the CDC and will not come back to the House floor until he's given the all clear. Well, hundreds of protesters gathered for a Stop the Steal rally at the Missouri Capitol in Jefferson City. Some said they feel disenfranchised. The rally was promoted through Facebook. Well, more Southeast Kansas counties are getting coronavirus vaccines, and you may remember last week we reported 100 doses of the Moderna vaccine in Crawford County when they were designated for Labette and Cherokee County. And now the vaccines are where they need to be. KOAM's Zach Dodge has what happens now.
Labette County Sheriff Darren Eisinger says now the vaccines are at the sheriff's office, it will be a good thing for everyone.
Deputies are out here looking that don't know who has it and has come in contact with people. I think it'll help both sides.
Staff at the sheriff's office have started getting their first doses of Moderna's coronavirus vaccine. So far, 16 people, around half of the department's staff, have taken the first dose. Many of them are jail staff, something that Eisinger says he pushed for, since in the last month, the jail's been dealing with a surge in COVID cases. Overall, they've seen 41 positives, and the jail can't currently take any new inmates.
I think that will help on our side as far as people being off work for 10 days, keeping our numbers up with our jail staff.
Cherokee County has also received their allocation of vaccines, with staff here at the Sheriff's Office getting access later this week.
65 residents who are in the healthcare profession, either a medical provider, pharmacist, ambulance, emergency medical personnel. So those have been administered as of this point.
At the end of December, the vaccines for both counties were stuck in Crawford County. At that point, Groves told us they were supposed to be sent directly to CHC SEK in Baxter Springs, but the state had them sent to the health department in Pittsburgh instead. So both counties had to submit paperwork to the state to get them where they needed to go.
I don't remember what day we did the interview, but it was within maybe the next day, possibly the day after that. So it was relatively quick.
He explains that doses will continue to go through Crawford County, but no matter how they come, both sheriffs are glad to see a light at the end of the tunnel.
The sooner we can get to that next phase of mitigating some of that hardship, the better.
In Labette and Cherokee County, Zach Dodge, KOAM News.
The state of Kansas is still in the first phase of its distribution plan. Officials expect vaccines to be available to the general public in the spring, with availability becoming widespread in the summer. On Wednesday, Governor Mike Parson announced over $68 million in federal budget stabilization funds. Appropriations for infrastructure and capital improvement projects at Missouri's public universities and State Technical College of Missouri. Governor Parson then announced $4 million in coronavirus aid, relief, and economic security funding for St. Louis Community College in Forest Park to improve the quality and availability of childcare and early education programs. Freeman OcuMed gave us a look at its new blood alcohol testing unit. Freeman officials tell us the new machines are an upgrade from the original test with an easier to read screen.
The technology jump is the biggest advancement and really helping us to be more modern day, because the old one was around since about the early 1990s, so that technology has truly advanced since then.
The new tests also have an air blank that ensures there is no residual alcohol left on the test, so patients can be sure they are accurate. That's a look at our top news stories. Coming up this half hour on the KOAM Morning News, a look at how a Nebraska paramedic is helping his colleagues stay safe on the front lines of the pandemic. Plus, reaction to the chaos on Capitol Hill from world leaders. But first, it's 5:37.
Quick check of the forecast before we head to another commercial break. We are starting out with a rain-snow mix this morning across much of the region. But as we go throughout the course of the morning, and especially by lunchtime, we're going to eventually see our upper-level system that's giving us the start this morning start to push off into the deep south. That means we're going to taper off on the rain and snow chances heading into the afternoon. Still, I can't rule out a stray shower or a few stray snow flurries during the afternoon. Doesn't change the fact that with mostly cloudy skies, we are going to stay cold on this Thursday with highs only topping out around 38. Dry to start the weekend, but it's going to stay kind of cold. 39 for your Friday. Highs back at least near 40 on Saturday. Another quick system on Sunday could bring in a few snow flurries our way, but we'll stay cold through Monday. And then finally, 40s and 50s return by Tuesday and Wednesday. We're back with World Watch after the break.
Topping World Watch, the chaos on Capitol Hill is sparking condemnation from leaders around the world. Tina Krause is in London with the reaction.
The violence at the U.S. Capitol dominated newscasts across the globe. Tweets from world leaders flooded social media. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson tweeting disgraceful scenes in U.S. Congress. NATO's Secretary General said the outcome of this democratic election must be respected. America's allies called it an assault on democracy.
I feel terribly for what's happening there. I really do. I mean, they are one of our closest friends and partners, the United States.
Germany's foreign minister took aim at President Trump, tweeting he and his supporters should finally accept the decision of the American voters and stop trampling on democracy. In Tokyo, a group of pro-Trump activists marched in support of the American president, while the Japanese government said it still hoped the U.S. would have a peaceful and democratic transfer of power. Tina Krause, CBS News, London.
Now, the Chinese government has not officially reacted to the chaos on Capitol Hill, but social media is filled with comparisons to last year's often violent pro-democracy protest in Hong Kong. European Medicines Agency announced yesterday that it has recommended granting conditional marketing authorization for the Moderna vaccine. The agency has assessed that the Moderna vaccine is safe and effective. And now they're working at full speed to approve it and make it available in the European Union. Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, tweeted that it is good news for the region's efforts to bring more vaccines to Europeans. Authorities in eastern Congo fear more than 40 people are dead after a motorized wooden boat capsized on Lake Kivu yesterday. The boat had been headed towards the regional capital of Goma when it sank in South Kivu province. The bodies of 2 children and a woman have been recovered. More than 40 people are still missing. 56 people were rescued. The owner of the boat, which took part in the rescue, said strong waves and heavy rain caused the tragedy. An auction house, Woolley and Wallace, is asking for the public's help. They're trying to solve the mystery of a Roman relic found at a home in England 20 years ago. The homeowner had no idea it was an ancient Roman marble slab. And then one day she noticed a laurel wreath carved into its face and a Greek inscription. An archaeologist dated it to the 2nd century, but how it ended up in a nondescript garden is a mystery. The stone is being sold next month with a pre-sale estimate of up to $20,000. Pretty cool. That's a look at some of your biggest headlines from around the world. Let's toss it over to Nick for our Something to Talk About.
And we are definitely talking about quite the event that happened yesterday. The events in D.C., to be precise, sparking nationwide controversy. Lawmakers in both parties condemned the protesters who stormed the Capitol building during the congressional electoral count yesterday. We made it the subject of our Something to Talk About this morning. We are asking for your reaction to yesterday's conflict in the Capitol. And needless to say, plenty of you have been chiming in. So off to Max Storm we go for some comments that we have a little time for. Daniel 6 chiming in. He's saying, anger and disappointment. I voted for Trump, but after his speech, then the actions of the protesters, I am done. I disagree with Biden on his policies, but he will be my president, so I will pray for him and hope he uses wisdom to lead America. We have Dave Sorek chiming in, praying for peace and healing. God bless America. We have Lisa Wickwire saying we all need to stop. All lives matter. And Lenny, I hope I'm getting your name right, Lenny Patram, saying absolutely so sad our country had to come to this. We have plenty of other people chiming in. We also made it the subject of our KOAM Instant Poll, so you can check your opinions that way, and you can decide whether or not it was justified or unjustified. And as you chime in, these numbers update in real time. Just head to KOAMNewsNow.com/vote, or just pull out your phone and vote on the KOAM News Now app. Whether it's you have iPhone or Android, you can chime in that way. We'll be checking what you have to say a little bit later on. In the meantime, another commercial break. We'll be back after this.
Here's a check of today's top headlines, the news you need to know before you head out the door. Lawmakers officially confirm President-elect Joe Biden as the next president of the United States in the early morning hours. Congress voted down objections raised by President Trump's GOP allies over the Arizona and Pennsylvania votes. Washington remains under a curfew after a mob of rioters supporting President Trump violently stormed the U.S. Capitol building, disrupting the congressional electoral count. About 200 people rallied at the Kansas State House yesterday to show their support for overturning President-elect Joe Biden's victory. They chanted, "Stop the steal, 4 more years and no more masks." Labette and Cherokee County, Kansas received coronavirus vaccines after vaccines are held up in Crawford County. Last week, we brought you a story about 100 doses of Moderna vaccine that were held up in Crawford County that were supposed to go to those counties. Both counties now have the vaccines, and Labette County Sheriff's Office has started vaccinating its staff. So far, 16 people there have been vaccinated, including the sheriff and multiple jailers. Good news for the office, since the jail has had 41 confirmed cases since the beginning of December. The Joplin School Board voted yesterday to extend a policy offering paid sick leave for workers who test positive for COVID-19. Federal policy giving workers 10 days of sick leave expired on December 31st. The school board is extending it until June 30th. That's a check of today's top headlines, the news you need to know before you head out the door.
And for our forecast for today, we are looking at a rain-snow mix to start the day out with cloud cover hanging tough, even as the rain and snow chances taper out throughout the day. Well, highs as a result only top out around 38 degrees this afternoon with a light northeast breeze of 5 to 10. We're dry going into tonight and your Friday morning, but if any roads are still wet as lows drop to 28, that could mean some slick spots for the morning commute on your Friday. So something to keep in mind and something we will keep an eye on as well as we get the weekend going starting tomorrow. At the very least, we're going to stay dry as the weekend gets going. 39, mostly cloudy with dry for your Friday, highs near 40 on Saturday. A few flurries are possible on Sunday as we wrap up the weekend with the weak system passing just to our south. But once we go into next week, we are going to see a more prolonged dry period head our way with temperatures starting cold on Monday. We're going to go 38 degrees for a high after we start cold at 23. But then Tuesday, Wednesday looking a lot better. 48 degrees for your Tuesday and pushing 56 with partly sunny skies on your Wednesday. We will continue to keep an eye on our rain and snow chances through the morning. We'll have the very latest on the forecast today at noon.
One paramedic discovered a face shield he could buy online worked better than the one he was issued. He bought it, but he didn't stop there. He also made sure his colleagues were covered. Emily Dwyer has his story.
I've been in COVID rooms for an hour or so working on a patient, alongside a nurse, and it's just nice to have these bad boys.
Those bad boys Charles Wilkins is referring to are heavy-duty face shields, and lately they are filling up this La Vista ER paramedic's living room.
There's 21 right there.
His goal?
So I wanted to outfit all the paramedics that I work with from these to these.
Wilkins says the hospital-issued face shields work well, but these are more durable and would belong to the paramedics themselves. For funding purposes, he explored avenues like CARES Act money. When that didn't pan out, he turned elsewhere.
I reached out to my friends, and the boxes have not stopped coming.
Thanks to social media and word of mouth, face shields are showing up on Wilkins' doorsteps, sometimes 3 at a time.
And for a while, I didn't have a living room. I also wonder how tired the Amazon guy is dropping these things off.
He's not just collecting them for his colleagues anymore, but paramedics across the entire metro healthcare community who work face-to-face with COVID-positive patients. He says every recipient is grateful.
And not only does it provide the protection, but it's just a huge morale boost. We've been dealing with COVID-19 for better part of a year now, and just it's another small win.
And Wilkins is happy to provide that added layer of comfort.
If I can keep one paramedic, in the fight longer because they had better protection, then I feel like I'm really doing my part.
Though he wishes it didn't have to come down to crowdfunding, with every new box that arrives comes a sense of joy and pride in his community.
We got a lot of good people in this community that are eager to help out in any way that they can. And sometimes clicking an Amazon link, to help us, that's a great way of doing their part.
That's awesome. Wilson says he'll keep accepting and distributing face shields as long as people keep sending them to him. It's one thing that's come around in this with the pandemic, a little bright light, Nick, that, there's all these good people out there doing good deeds.
I know, absolutely, and that's what keeps us going during times like this. All these kind gestures, whether it's food pantry donations or the face shields in this case, it's always good to see bright spots like that during these times, Tanya. In the meantime, we are on Facebook, if you didn't know. If you haven't followed me yet, why not? I talk about more than just weather. Of course, I'm keeping an eye on weather throughout the course of the day. I'll have an update by about 8 or 8:30 based on the wintry mix that we have out there. But again, I do more than just weather. I love posting music, especially songs that you may not have heard in quite a while, especially from Journey, the rock station back home for me, put their entire 50-year catalog on shuffle. No repeats throughout the last week of 2020, and they played Of a Lifetime from Journey. This was before Steve Perry joined in. They don't get a lot of credit, but the amazing guitar work, especially from Neil Schon on this song, Of a Lifetime, their first Journey album, it is really good. You can find that on my Facebook page. And of course, you can follow us on KOAM News Now, where we do definitely have something to talk about, where it is all about the protests that took place in Washington, D.C. yesterday, and we just want to hear from you what your reaction was to the protest that took place. And not only do we want to hear from you on our Facebook page, it's a poll on our KOAM News Now Insta poll question. We want to hear whether you think it was justified or unjustified. The poll's still open. You can chime in on KOAMNewsNow.com/vote or fire up the KOAM News Now app on your phone, be it Apple or Android. You can let us know that way. In the meantime, we'll get to another commercial break, and we'll be back after this. Our weather today is dictated by an upper level low working now across central parts of Arkansas and northern parts of Louisiana. Around here, that's keeping the cloud cover in play and starting us out with a rain-snow mix. It started out as rain yesterday, but with colder air aloft and temperatures just cold enough at the surface, we are seeing snow mixing in with our rain chances to start the day out. It's not going to stay like this all day, though. We'll continue with these periods of rain and snow throughout the morning. Then once we get past the start of the afternoon, we're going to dry things out, but stay cloudy with highs topping out around 38. And that's where the entire area where, again, the activity starts to taper off once we get past the start of the afternoon. You could twist my arm and say maybe a few straggling showers later in the afternoon, but the emphasis from here on out will be a dry start to the weekend with highs near 40 for Friday and Saturday before we see a few flurries on Sunday. We're back after the break.
Congress certifies Joe Biden's victory in the Electoral College. Will have highlights from a chaotic day in the nation's capital, plus the latest on election protest at 4 state capitol buildings, and some Southeast Kansas Sheriff's Department employees begin receiving COVID-19 vaccines after a delay.
The 4 states' most watched news starts now.
Welcome to the KOAM Morning News. It's 6 a.m. I'm Tanya Bach. Coming up this half hour, Twitter and Facebook locks the president's social media accounts following violent protest in Washington, D.C. We'll have the latest. And yesterday's protests are the subject of our Something to Talk About. Let us know your thoughts on the unrest in the Capitol. You can also participate in our Insta poll at KOAMNewsNow.com/vote. But first, check on your forecast.
All right, thank you, Tanya, and good morning, everybody. Nick here in for Michael Hayslip as he has the day off. We are looking at quite a cloudy start from Freeman Health System on the south side of Joplin, and at times seeing a few raindrops and snowflakes flirting across the camera lens on the south side of town. Technically, there is still a winter weather advisory for Lawrence, Berry, and Benton counties on the Missouri and Arkansas side until 3 o'clock this afternoon. But even though the entire area is not under a winter weather advisory, we do have some light to moderate rains getting our morning started. And for some of you, it's definitely mixed in with some snow. In fact, again, on the way in from Joplin this morning, I saw some interesting accumulating snow on the grassy surfaces, almost pushing about ½ an inch in some spots. This is an upper level storm system that's starting us off with the rain and snow mix for this morning, but we're going to see this gradually taper off throughout the course of the day. Doesn't change the fact that it's definitely cold to start this morning out. Most spots between 33 and 35 at the top of the 6 o'clock hour. We're going to hold steady at this range as the kiddos get ready for school, and we'll still have these chances for rain and snow around as the day gets going. As we go through the rest of the day, though, we're going to taper off on the rain and snow chances as we go throughout the course of the afternoon. But as long as the cloud cover hangs tough, not much of a warm-up today with highs only topping out around 38 degrees. We do have dry time on the way, Tanya, and warmer temperatures on the horizon. We'll show you that and more on the 7-day coming up in a bit.
I like the idea of warmer temperatures on the horizon. That sounds nice.
It does sound nice. I just wish we had more snow coming down, but it is still nice to see it this morning.
Yeah, if we're going to get it, give us enough to play in.
A little bit, yeah.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Nick. All right, so Congress officially confirmed President-elect Joe Biden as the next president of the United States in the early morning hours. Congress voted down objections raised by President Trump's GOP allies over the Arizona and Pennsylvania votes. Earlier in the day, some rioters entered the House chamber. 4 people died, including one woman who was shot. The mob marched on the Capitol after being incited by the president at a morning rally. By evening, shaken lawmakers reconvened to continue the presidential electoral vote count. Protesters across the state of Kansas gathered at the Kansas Capitol building yesterday supporting President Donald Trump. Unlike in D.C., this was a peaceful gathering. Joseph Hennessy has more on their message and how authorities handled the crowd.
Kansas law enforcement and the protesters want to make it clear what occurred in Washington, D.C. did not happen in the state's capital. Hundreds joined the Kansas Red Wave United We Stand Fight for Trump rally. They drove past the governor's mansion then headed to the State House steps.
We believe that we won the election by a landslide, and so it's really difficult for us to swallow all the fraud that's been going on.
If it doesn't work today, we're going to continue this. We're going to continue to protest, and we're going to continue to voice our opinion, and we're going to continue to write and call our congressmen and hold them accountable.
A smaller group then moved inside. Authorities say they had a permit and went through the security screening at the entrance.
They came in, they followed directions, they were very cooperative, so there was no issue whatsoever.
Michael Alvarez was frustrated when news broke Wednesday afternoon, saying otherwise.
We didn't breach it, we didn't run in here. They put it was like the chaos going on in Washington, D.C. It is nothing like that, so just more fake news.
KHP says they had precautions in place, as they do for all rallies.
We would have called in the right people to be here. We would have already here. We had plenty on the outside and plenty inside, so we would have responded pretty quick.
Protesters also rallied in Jefferson City and in Oklahoma City. Labette and Cherokee County, Kansas received coronavirus vaccines after vaccines are held up in Crawford County. Last week, we brought you a story about 100 doses of Moderna vaccine that were held up in Crawford County that were supposed to go to those counties. Both counties now have the vaccines, and the Labette County Sheriff's Office has started vaccinating its staff. So far, 16 people there have been vaccinated, including the sheriff and multiple jailers. Good news for the office, since the jail has had 41 confirmed cases since the beginning of December.
Right now, like I said, the majority of them have taken the vaccination back there, so I think that will help on our side as far as people being off work for 10 days. Keeping our numbers up with our jail staff.
Cherokee County has also received 65 doses of the vaccine, with plans to start vaccinating staff at the sheriff's office later this week. The Oklahoma Department of Health will begin notifying some Oklahomans today that they are eligible for appointments to get COVID vaccines. Oklahomans who are healthcare workers, first responders, or over the age of 65 will be eligible for appointments starting today. The state health department says those people should check their email first thing this morning, as that will be the first opportunity to schedule their vaccine appointment. COVID vaccinations are progressing at Missouri's long-term care facilities. The national pharmacy chain CVS Health said today it has completed coronavirus vaccinations at more than 100 long-term care facilities in Missouri, but that it still has 500 more to go. The U.S. Department of Health and Senior Services last year selected CVS Health and Walgreens to administer vaccinations at nursing homes and other long-term care facilities across the U.S. In Missouri, those vaccinations began on December 28th. CVS says it expects to finish administering the first round of COVID-19 vaccine doses in the nation's long-term care facilities by January 25th. 6:07.
Let's have a peek at our 7-day forecast. We are starting the day out with a rain-snow mix as temperatures at the surface warm just a little more. We're going to see most of this come to an end as mainly rain chances, but either way, once we hit the afternoon, we're going to see this activity taper off. We are looking at highs today right around 38 degrees. Let's go 39 for your Friday, 40 on Saturday. Dry to start the weekend out. Then we'll see if a few flurries can head our way by Sunday.
All right, that's a look at this morning's top stories and weather in our first 7 minutes. Coming up on the KOAM Morning News, our own Jesse Irwin learns about a virtual hiring event.
Well, for a lot of people who are looking for jobs in 2021, there are different ways of going about it. But what about for the people who are doing the hiring? We speak with the Missouri Job Centers about how they're going about it, coming up.
Plus, why the nation's top infectious disease expert is worried about a new variant of the coronavirus. And when can you expect a stimulus check to hit your bank account if it hasn't already? You're watching the KOAM Morning News. More real news in the morning. We'll be right back. In Money Watch, stocks were mixed during a busy Wednesday. The Dow jumped 437 points. The Nasdaq fell 78. S&P 500 added 21. With projected wins in Georgia's 2 Senate runoff elections, Democrats are now set to control Congress when President-elect Biden takes office, which investors hope means a new and larger coronavirus relief package. The pro-Trump riots at the U.S. Capitol did lead to a slight pullback in the afternoon. A second round of stimulus payments are on the way. So when will eligible individuals and families receive the money? Andy Gaither explains.
The motion to concur is agreed to.
In a sweeping pandemic aid bill passed just before Christmas, Congress approved $600 stimulus payments for each eligible person. The first of those payments started going out on December 29th. You may have seen it pending in your account, but the funds officially became available Monday. The payments will continue to be sent through January 15th. But anyone eligible who isn't automatically sent the money by then will have to claim it on their 2020 tax return, according to the IRS. Paper checks or debit cards will be sent to those who don't already have a bank account on file with the IRS. Checks also began going out last week. People can check the status of both their first and second stimulus payments by using the Internal Revenue Service's Get My Payment Online tool. Some people may not receive the money the same way as in the first round. If you were sent a preloaded debit card last year, the payment will not be added to that card. You'll either receive a new card in the mail or a paper check. For Consumer Watch, I'm Mandy Gaither.
Eligibility is largely based on income. Those earning less than $75,000 a year will get the full $600. The full payment will also go to heads of households earning less than $112,500 and married couples filing jointly earning less than $150,000 a year. They'll also receive $600 per child under the age of 17. Well, gas mileage and pollution in 2019 cars got worse compared to the previous year for the first time in 5 years. According to the Environmental Protection Agency, gas mileage dropped 0.2 miles per gallon and greenhouse gas emissions rose nearly 1%. Environmental groups blame the EPA for rolling back Obama-era standards, which the Trump administration said were too burdensome on auto manufacturers. A post and a video from President Trump addressing those supporters, seemingly sympathizing with them while also repeating false claims about the election, led to social media companies taking their strongest action to date against President Trump's rhetoric. Twitter and Facebook each locked his account for the day, with Twitter adding that if he does not stop violating the site's rules, he could be permanently banned. Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube removed the video from their platforms. That's it from Money Watch. Here's Nick Kelly with our Something to Talk About.
And our Something to Talk About this morning, Tanya, has to do with the events that took place in D.C. yesterday, sparking nationwide controversy. Lawmakers in both parties condemned the protesters who stormed the Capitol building during the congressional electoral count yesterday. So that is the subject of our morning talker this morning. We want to know what your reaction was to yesterday's conflict in the U.S. Capitol. We have a few people chiming in. Colleen McGuire says any protests that involve destruction of property have devolved away from the constitutional right to peacefully assemble and protest. We have a couple other comments on here. Rick Norton chiming in saying yesterday was a sad day for America. Once the Capitol was breached, it was no longer a protest. They became domestic terrorists. We have Ryan Howard chiming in saying not once did the president say storm into the Capitol. He supposedly says it was Antifa and BLM. We'll continue to follow that closely and see if any of that evidence comes to light. We have, oh goodness, a whole slew of comments here. Celicia Parrish saying it was a sad day for our country for sure. But we also have our KOAM News Now Insta poll where you can also chime in as well. We want you to know from there if you think it was justified or unjustified. KOAMNewsNow.com/vote or using the KOAM News Now mobile app. You can chime in that way. We'll be back after the break. We're off to a cold start this morning. It's certainly cold enough upstairs with temperatures just hovering above freezing. We are having this upper low passing just to our south. Start us off with a rain-snow mix as we get our Thursday morning started. You can see how yesterday going into very early this morning, this was all mainly in the form of rain, but as temperatures got colder upstairs and near the surface, during the early morning hours, we saw some snow mixing in, and at times it was coming down on a moderate clip, leading to grassy surface accumulations almost pushing in half an inch from what I've seen on the drive into work this morning. Now, with a little bit of a bump in temperatures just slightly at the surface, we're seeing mainly rain on the Skywatch Storm Tracker, still some embedded snow around areas to the west of Table Rock Lake. But no matter what is falling from the sky where you are, everyone's cloudy, including our look at Freeman Health System on the south side of town. 35 in Joplin, feels like 29 with that north breeze at about 7 miles per hour. Everybody's cold, mainly in the lower to middle 30s to start this morning out. We're all starting out with cloud cover. We're all starting out with rain and some snow mixing in, and that continues at a good pace up until about the noon hour. Then through the afternoon, we're going to taper off on this activity, but hold on to the clouds for the rest of the day. That means instead of afternoon highs right around 44, we're only going to see highs topping out around 38 degrees for today. So again, we're going to have to deal with this rain-snow mix on top of us this morning. That could lead to some slushy roads, but not a big impact on the roads. Then we're going to dry out mainly throughout the course of the afternoon. You can still argue maybe a stray shower skirting about, but we're dry through this evening and into tonight. But as temperatures drop into the upper 20s, any wet roads could become a bit slick, so we'll keep an eye on that for you as we begin the morning drive for your Friday. But we're dry to start the weekend out. 39 Friday, 40 on Saturday. Then we'll see if we can get a few flurries back in here to wrap up the weekend on Sunday. That's it for me. Let's toss it over to Jesse.
Well, this morning we are joined by Pam Regan, who is with Southwest Missouri Job Centers. And Pam, I'm happy to have you here virtually because we're talking about a virtual event that's happening this Thursday. It's today. So, I mean, tell me about who you're targeting with this event and what's going to be happening.
So the event today is at noon. It is a Zoom meeting, and it is targeting hiring staff from all of our businesses, business owners, HR personnel here in the Southwest region. And the purpose of the meeting is it's our business league meeting, and we're having someone from our Office of Workforce Development come in via Zoom and talk to these employers about how they can use our jobs.mo.gov system to help them hire in a virtual world in 2020.
And there's a lot of people who would probably kill to have a conversation with you about job seeking in 2021. And so when it comes to how the market of jobs has changed over the last 9 months, but even just the last month, I mean, what have you seen from your perspective?
Well, our biggest challenge right now is that we can't do interviews. We can't hold hiring events because of our COVID restrictions here at the Job Center. It's harder for us to have people come in, to have employers come in. You know, in the past, we would hold job fairs and we would have 250, 300 people come through the doors. We can't do that now.
Well, given the fact that this event is for people who work from the HR perspective, people who are in the positions of power that are hiring, what are some things that are going on in the minds of HR people that you might want an applicant to be aware of?
Well, a lot of from the employer's aspect of our MoJob system is that job order. Getting that job order in and making sure that what you're looking for is it's the wording that you put into those things. It's making sure that the customer understands what kind of position you're looking to hire in, and then using those keywords that you know as an HR person that has looked at a 1,012 resumes, you know what people put on their resumes at this point. So you want to make sure that those keywords are in there because that becomes very important in another aspect of our system that will help that HR person find the customer. So our system works both ways. Our customers can look for the jobs. Our employers can also look for the customers.
That's phenomenal advice. Well, if you are interested in being involved with the event, you can register online. Is that correct?
Yes, until 11:45, we'll say.
All right, so you got a few hours here. But hey, Pam, we really appreciate your time this morning. We'll have more information on our morning show page, KOAMnewsnow.com, and we'll be right back on the KOAM Morning News right after this.
Topping Health Watch this morning as the post-holiday COVID-19 surge continues and vaccines slowly roll out. Now health officials say a new threat is identified in South Africa. John Lawrence reports.
The United States' battle against COVID-19 is far from over.
It's not a home run yet because we don't really have the kinds of drugs
where you give it that can stop the virus in its tracks.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's ensemble forecast projects as many as 438,000 people in the U.S. could die from COVID-19 by the end of the month. Some Nevada funeral homes are running out of space to store bodies and are using refrigerated trailers.
It's unfortunate. It's something that I never would ever have believed in my career I would ever have to be dealing with this.
CDC officials say a variant of the virus, first found in the UK, has infected at least 52 people in the US.
What it does, according to the Brits, is that it makes it easier for the virus to spread from person to person. So it is a virus that is in many respects more transmissible.
Dr. Anthony Fauci, the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, is also concerned about another version of the virus, first identified in South Africa, which may lessen the effectiveness of COVID-19 antibody treatments.
It is a little bit more complicated because some of those mutations might have a negative impact on the efficacy of some of the monoclonal antibodies that are used.
I'm John Lawrence reporting.
The U.S. rose above 21 million known infections and at least 131,000 people are hospitalized. As the post-holiday surge continues, officials are trying to speed the pace of vaccinations. Well, the CDC says it has seen 29 cases of severe allergic reactions to coronavirus vaccines. A new report looked at the first week in a half of the vaccine rollout when 1.9 million people were inoculated. CDC says all the severe reactions happened within minutes, but all of the patients it followed up with have recovered. Officials say people with general allergies should not be concerned, but they may want to consult a healthcare provider before getting their shots. The rate of severe reactions is higher than in flu vaccines. However, CDC officials say the reactions from COVID vaccines are still rare. That's a look at some of today's top health stories. You're watching the KOAM Morning News.
And before we hit another commercial break, 627, quick weather recap has us topping out at 38 degrees today. That's after we get rid of our rain and snow chances by the time we hit lunchtime. But although if we go to the future track and run you through the rest of the morning, again, backing up the assertion that we will taper off on the rain and snow chances by lunchtime, you could still argue maybe a stray shower or a quick snow shower during the afternoon. But after that, we'll dry out as we head towards tonight, but turning cold with lows near 28. At least we're dry for Friday and Saturday. 39 Friday, 40 on Saturday. Then another system on Sunday. Could try to bring a few flurries our way, but we'll stay cloudy and cold to wrap up the weekend. Back after the break.
Congress certifies Joe Biden's victory in the Electoral College. We'll have highlights from a chaotic day in the nation's capital, plus the latest on election protest at 4 state capitol buildings, and some Southeast Kansas Sheriff's Department employees begin receiving COVID-19 vaccines after a delay.
The 4 states most watched news starts now.
Good morning and welcome to the KOAM Morning News. It's 6:30. I'm Tanya Bach. Coming up this half hour, why American Airlines has halted the sale of alcohol in flights to D.C. Something to talk about on the KOAM News Now Facebook page. We're asking for your reaction to the unrest at the Capitol yesterday. But first, a check on your forecast.
And a good morning to you, Tanya, and everyone at home. Nick here in for Slip as he has today off. We are looking at a quiet view from Freeman Health System. At least on first glimpse, looks like a quiet view. But as we head to the Skywatch Storm Tracker, we do have a winter weather advisory still for Lawrence, Berry, and Benton County on the Missouri and Arkansas side until 3 o'clock this afternoon, all because of an upper level low, giving us a rain-snow mix to start the morning out. At the start of the show at 5 o'clock, we had a good mix of rain and snow across the region, but now as temperatures slowly inch just a degree or two upward, we're seeing mainly rain on the radar, but still some pockets of snow across parts of Berry and Lawrence County. In general, though, we're going to keep at it with the periods of rain and snow mixing in at times throughout the course of the morning, so keep that in mind before you head out the door. And keep this in mind, too. It's going to be cold. Probably didn't need me to tell you that, but 33 to 35 degrees. That's where we all sit at 6:31 on this Thursday morning. So kids, holding in the mid-30s with the rain-snow mix, have the jackets and the umbrellas handy for the bus stop. And as far as the rest of the day is concerned, we're going to continue with this period of rain and snow up until noon. Then we're going to taper things off throughout the afternoon. We're going to hold on to the clouds, though, so that means fortunately today we'll only make it to about 38 degrees, but we are going to trend drier and eventually warmer over the next several days. We'll break that down a little bit coming up, Tanya.
All right, sounds like we got a lot to break down and talk about.
Yeah, I just wish we had more snow on the way. And like you said earlier, I just wish we had more snow to put the sleds to work with.
Yeah, we've already, earlier in the show, we told people how to avoid sledding injuries, although I won't be putting a helmet on.
I know, like with me, I always just bail before I run into something.
I think the only sledding injury my family's dealt with is when you have a big person and a little person on the same sled and you go tumbling, and that big person lands on top of the little person.
That should do it.
We're talking like adult and kid. But yeah, that doesn't always feel the best.
No, not really.
Usually ends the day when the kid's head first smashed into the snow. But makes for a fun story later.
Oh, it certainly does.
Man, I wish we need to go sledding. All right, thanks, Nick. Well, Congress officially confirmed President-elect Joe Biden as the next president of the United States in the early morning hours. Congress voted down objections raised by President Trump's GOP allies over the Arizona and Pennsylvania votes. Earlier in the day, some rioters entered the House chamber. 4 people died, including 1 woman who was shot. The mob marched on the Capitol after being incited by the president at a morning rally. By evening, shaken lawmakers reconvened to continue the presidential electoral vote count. The scene in our nation's capital couldn't be more different than what occurred at the Oklahoma Capitol yesterday. The Oklahoma Republican Party says hundreds of people gathered to show their support of the president and challenge the presidential election results. Hunter McKee has the latest.
Flags and signs were carried by many today in support of the current president.
I am so proud of us for getting out and about. We are the silent majority, no more.
The group says this is an opportunity for everyone to come together and unite in a peaceful rally. Some say the main purpose of the gathering is because they believe the election wasn't properly organized.
An objection to the certification of illegally cast electoral votes. An objection to the denial of appropriate action by both the U.S. Supreme Court as well as the majority of U.S. Congress.
We let them run over us, but no more. We're not going to take it anymore.
Others believe the party isn't being represented properly and says it's about speaking out.
There's a lot of people that just want to see a free and fair election. They just want to feel like their voice was heard.
The Oklahoma Democratic Party chose not to counter-protest today. However, they are asking those to take action from home by calling for Senator James Lankford to resign. Leaders of the group say they started a petition due to Lankford objecting to the recent electoral Senate vote.
Well, after the rally, the group then got in their cars and drove throughout the downtown area. About 200 people rallied at the Kansas State House yesterday to show their support for overturning President-elect Joe Biden's victory. They chanted, "Stop the steal, 4 more years, and no more masks." The rally even brought up some prominent Republican leaders. Well, hundreds of protesters also gathered for a Stop the Steal rally at the Missouri Capitol in Jefferson City. Some said they feel disenfranchised. The CBS affiliate there, KRCG, says some protesters drove more than 2 hours to be at that rally. In Little Rock, supporters of President Trump gathered on the steps of the Arkansas State Capitol, carrying flags and signs and chanting about stopping the, quote, steal of the election. One supporter told reporters this isn't about parties, but about fairness.
We've got to have voter integrity. It's not about Trump. It's not about Biden. It's about the future of our country and our voter integrity going forward from here on.
The group stayed peaceful, though there were several people there with guns. The group dispersed after just a few hours. More Southeast Kansas counties are getting coronavirus vaccines. Last week, we reported 100 doses of Moderna vaccine were in Crawford County when they were designated for Labette and Cherokee County. Both counties have now received those vaccines, and staff at the Labette County Sheriff's Office have started being vaccinated. Many of them are jail staff, something the sheriff prioritized since they've been dealing with the COVID outbreak that's resulted in 41 positive cases. Cherokee County is also getting ready to vaccinate staff, with a lot of emergency medical personnel already getting first doses. A research assistant at the University of Kansas has discovered a new snake species. The peer-reviewed journal KOAM recently published the findings. Now, the new species are known as the Waray dwarf burrowing snake. Hope I got that right. The species is native to islands in the Philippines. It has a low and narrow skull relative to its size, and the fewest number of vertebrae than any snake species in the world. The species was discovered during a field mission. Pretty coloring on that snake, too. That's a look at our top news stories coming up this half hour on the KOAM Morning News. Democrats take the Senate. We'll have the latest from the two key Senate races in Georgia. Plus, what's your reaction to the election protest in Washington, D.C.? We let you weigh in our Something to Talk About. But first, it's 6:37.
Quick recap of the forecast for today. The rain snow mix that we're starting out with this morning tapers off during the afternoon, but as we hold on to the clouds, temperatures won't warm up that much. We'll only make it to 38 degrees today. We'll drop into the upper 20s tonight. At least we're dry to start the weekend now. 39 for your Friday, 40 degrees for Saturday afternoon. Another quick system could bring in a few flurries on Sunday, but we're going to stay cloudy and cold to wrap up the weekend. And after a cold Monday, we're back in the 40s on Tuesday and the 50s by Wednesday. More coming up after the break.
Sweep of the Georgia Senate runoffs. Raphael Warnock was declared the winner over incumbent Kelly Loeffler, and Jon Ossoff defeated incumbent David Perdue. Peter Ducey has the latest from Atlanta.
Shortly before Georgia's Secretary of State was escorted from Georgia's State House grounds by security officials concerned about a protest there, Fox News interviewed him about recent rhetoric.
How concerned are you, now that the election is over, about violence against yourself or your family or other elections officials?
I hope it calms down. Obviously, people are spinning people up with their emotions, with all these false allegations, misinformation, disinformation, point by point rebuttal. There's just everything that people are saying out there in fake media land. Anyone can say anything on Twitter, but it doesn't make it facts.
Brad Raffensperger is ultimately in charge of all election activity in Georgia.
Are you worried? Because a lot of this stuff sounds pretty scary. Some of the threats and some of the temperature.
I guess I've read once that when someone said calm breeds calm, panic breeds panic, and we're calm, we're focused. We want to make sure we finish up this election. We want to make sure then if there is a recount, we'll be ready to handle that.
Republican officials in charge of Georgia's elections have reviewed outstanding ballots, and they're ready to call it for the Democrats.
Ossoff avoids that recount, so does Reverend Warnock.
Republican David Perdue is still pledging to exhaust every legal resource in his race, but Fox News projects Democrat Jon Ossoff is the winner.
It is with humility that I thank the people of Georgia.
Republican Kelly Loeffler isn't conceding either, but Fox News projects her opponent, Democrat Raphael Warnock, is heading to Washington.
Every day I'm in the United States Senate, I will fight for you.
And these Republican election officials are confident this one was clean.
Have you guys been investigating today any claims of election day fraud or early voting fraud?
We have obviously investigations, but nothing that looks like it would ever overturn these races.
Well, there had been calls for a special session of the Georgia State Legislature to investigate claims of voter fraud in the November election. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp said the events in Washington, D.C. proved that a special session, that a special session would have been a disaster, and he is extending now an order activating the Georgia National Guard. Supporters of President Trump stormed the gates of the governor's mansion in Washington state yesterday. People chanting "Recount" and "Stop the Steal" pushed through an entrance and forced their way to the front lawn of the governor's house. The group, some of whom were armed, began the protest at the state's Capitol building before making their way to the mansion. People were seen pushing their way through the gate, even after a state trooper forced one of the protesters back out. Washington State Patrol reported the situation is under control. Protesters were pushed back outside the gate. American Airlines says it will not serve alcohol on its flights to and from Washington, D.C. The airline made the announcement on Wednesday. They said flight attendants have reported, quote, politically motivated aggression towards other passengers and crew. American Airlines also plans to increase staffing at airports in the D.C. area. It says the policy change is a precautionary measure. That's a look at today's top national stories. Let's check back in with Nick for our Morning Talker.
And it is quite the Morning Talker this morning, Tanya. It's focused on the events that took place in D.C. yesterday, and it's actually sparking nationwide controversy. Lawmakers in both parties condemned the protesters who stormed the Capitol building during the congressional electoral count yesterday, and that is the very subject of our Morning Talker. We want to ask you, or we are asking you for that matter, your reaction to yesterday's conflict in the Capitol. We definitely have people chiming in. We have Donna saying, times are really scary. I'm really sick to my stomach over all this, watching all this disgust fall out on the U.S. Capitol. Colby Metcalf saying, riots, not protests. My home is better protected against invasion than the Capitol seemed to be. Quite strange. And you can see how we have plenty of people chiming in saying, Oh, here's James Cole, for example. Mother used to say 2 wrongs don't make a right. I condemned the riots of last summer, and I'm condemning the riot last night. My loyalty is to the nation and Constitution, not to an individual. And don't forget, you can chime in on this subject with our KOAM Insta poll, whether it was justified or not. We have 16% saying it was justified and 83% rather now, see the numbers update automatically, saying it wasn't. Keep chiming in. KOAM News Now on the Facebook page and our Insta poll. We'll be right back.
We take this time to honor today's 4-state hero, Petty Officer 2nd Class Bobby Garrett, a member of the United States Navy in 1961. He served aboard the USS Sheldrake during the Vietnam War. His hometown, Liberal, Missouri. We are proud to salute Bobby Garrett, our 4-state hero.
Let's kick off birthdays this morning, starting with young Briley Renee, turning 5 out of Girard. Looking nice for the camera. Happy birthday, Briley.
What a cute picture of Briley there. Yeah. Chief Miller is 7 strong this year, riding strong on that bike there in Seneca. Happy birthday, Chief.
We head back to Girard. Ellie Carson. She's also 7 strong this year. Happy birthday to you, Ellie.
Great picture there.
Yeah.
And the Heddies will be celebrating in Parsons. Owen Heddy is 7 years old. Great picture there of little Owen in Parsons.
We want to wish a happy birthday to Jackson Barcelona. I guess his nickname is Joe. Whether you go by Joe or Jackson, happy 11th birthday to you.
All right, out in Fredonia, Braylon Gayu celebrated earlier this week, actually on Tuesday, turning 11 years old. Happy birthday, Braylon.
Yeah, happy birthday to you. We move on to Madison. Let me get this last name right. Either Rival or Rebel. 18 in Humboldt. Happy birthday, Madison.
Bindi Cunningham turning 50 years old. The big 5-0 for Bindi. Hope you have a great one.
All right, we have Dave Ashmore out of Arma turning 68. Happy birthday to you, Dave.
In Girard, Janet Houston celebrating birthday number 71 this year. Looks like she's got a little one to spoil there now.
Absolutely. We have our first anniversary on the list. Jan and Roland Campbell out of Girard, 31 years of wedded bliss. Happy anniversary to you too.
Well, the Wells are celebrating 32 years this year in Joplin. Congrats going out to Gary and Bonnie Wells.
Happy anniversary to those two as well. We round out the birthday list today with Bill McDermott turning 80 out of Crestline, Jenny Snow out of Frontenac, adding another candle to the cake, and a happy birthday to Kylie Fagan. If you want us to wish you a happy birthday or to give you an anniversary shout out, just let us know. Send an email to us at birthdays@KOAMTV.com or just head over to KOAMNewsNow.com/birthdays. And don't forget about the birthday club. We can't forget about that, right, Tanya?
That's right. You can be a part of it by going to our website and signing up. And once you do, you'll get special deals from local businesses. Go to KOAMNewsNow.com, sign up for the KOAM Birthday Club today.
All right, we want to thank E-Rail Commodity for help sponsoring the Birthday Club. Now let's get back to the forecast here before we hit another commercial break and before we start to wrap things up this morning. We're starting with the upper levels from a wider view because it's all about this upper low working across the deep south this morning. It is prompting a winter weather advisory for Barry, Lawrence, and also Benton County on the Missouri and Arkansas side until 3 o'clock this afternoon because this upper low started things off with rain yesterday, but as temperatures got colder overnight, we saw snow mix in with our rain chances as we continue on throughout the morning. But ever since temperatures tried to tick up a degree or two near the surface, even though it's still cold upstairs, we're seeing mainly rain at close to the 7 o'clock hour with some embedded snow working in, especially east of 49. From Freeman Health System on the south side of town, we got quiet skies, at least what looks like quiet skies, but it's cold at 35. Feels like 29 with that north breeze at 7 miles per hour. Everyone's cold this morning, mainly in the mid-30s right now. And I see us holding steady for the mid-30s throughout the rest of the morning, maybe pushing 36 by noon. But once we hit the afternoon, we're going to taper off on these rain and snow chances. But as long as that cloud cover hangs tough, forget about the average high of 44. We'll only make it to 38 degrees today. So the future track from 8 o'clock this morning, taking us to about lunchtime, shows the rain and the snow chances tapering off, especially as we head toward the afternoon. That being said, If you had to twist my arm, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a stray rain or snow shower still trying to hold on. But definitely this evening, we're going to stay dry. But as we turn colder with mostly cloudy skies, any wet roads with lows in the upper 20s, it could be a bit tricky with some of them turning slick throughout the overnight, but we are going to see warmer temperatures on the horizon and at least a dry start to the weekend. We'll recap that in the 7-day when we come back to wrap things up right after the break. As for what's trending this morning, let's tease once again our something to talk about. It's all about the protests that took place at the U.S. Capitol yesterday as Congress was looking to certify the Electoral College count. We want to hear from you. What was your reaction to the unrest that took place at the Capitol? You can chime in on our Facebook page and still have time to participate in the KOAM News Now Insta poll at KOAMNewsNow.com/vote or by voting through the KOAM News Now app. In the meantime, Tanya, back over to you.
All right, here's a check of today's top headlines, the news you need to know before you head out the door. Lawmakers officially confirmed President-elect Joe Biden as the next president of the United States in the early morning hours. Congress voted down objections raised by President Trump's GOP allies over the Arizona and Pennsylvania votes. Washington remains under a curfew after a mob of rioters supporting President Trump violently stormed the U.S. Capitol building, disrupting the congressional electoral count. About 200 people rallied at the Kansas State House yesterday to show their support for overturning President-elect Joe Biden's victory. They chanted, "Stop the steal," 4 more years, and no more masks. Labette and Cherokee County, Kansas received coronavirus vaccines after vaccines are held up in Crawford County. You'll remember last week we brought you a story about 100 doses of the Moderna vaccine that were held up in Crawford County and were supposed to go to those counties. Both counties now have the vaccines, and the Labette County Sheriff's Office has started vaccinating staff. So far, 16 people there have been vaccinated, including the sheriff and multiple jailers, which is good news for the office since the jail has had 41 confirmed cases since the beginning of December. The Joplin School Board voted yesterday to extend a policy offering paid sick leave for workers who test positive for COVID-19. Federal policy giving workers 10 days of sick leave expired on December 31st. The school board is extending it until June 30th. That's a check of today's top headlines, the news you need to know before you head out the door.
And as I promised, your last look at the 7-day forecast before we wrap things up here continues with the rain-snow mix throughout the course of the morning, then throughout the afternoon. We're going to slowly say goodbye to these rain and snow chances. But staying cold with highs through 38, pushing upper 30s to near 40 for Friday and Saturday. Both days dry before we see maybe a few flurries on Sunday. Then by the middle of next week, we're going to have 40s and 50s, thankfully returning.
Coming up today at noon, we're making a cheeseburger salad in a jar. That's what's on the menu in the Mr. Food Test Kitchen.
Curious to see what that looks like. In the meantime, the morning news here on KOAM continues with CBS This Morning with Gail, Anthony, and Tony. But we're not done here yet, are we, Tanya?
Oh, you can switch on over with us on Fox 14, where your only local morning news continues.
Well, this morning we're going to be looking at the Missouri Job Centers, how they're helping not only people applying to jobs, but the people who are hiring as well. So we've got info on that. They've got a virtual seminar later this morning, so we'll have the details. Plus, we're going to continue our local coverage on everything that's been unfolding at the Capitol and how things are looking as we head into this beautiful Thursday morning. So we'll have that over on Fox 14 for you.
All right, thank you, Jesse. We'll see you in a little bit. In the meantime, that wraps it up for us for now, folks, on the KOAM side. We hope you have a great Thursday. We'll see you right back here tomorrow morning.
And we'll see you today at noon.